Welcome our very distinguished guest today, and I'm glad that all of you could make it for the post-lunch session. I know it was a bit last moment decision, but we've all been extremely involved in various activities in the last few years. And the last 1 week, a lot of leaders in the area, particularly in computer science and communication, had converged in New Delhi for one of the biggest conferences ever held in India. It was the Leviticus. So we were fortunate that a lot of people, agreed to come, showed interest in visiting the university. So I thought to put a tap them. They kindly come here. So a very warm welcome before I introduce our first speaker today. A very warm welcome to three of our very illustrious friends. One of the first speaker today is Professor Sajal Das. I'll give a detailed introduction in a short while from now. Professor Sajal Das from University of Texas at Arlington in Texas. He knows Professor Kalyan Basu very well, who has visited the campus earlier. Professor Das has several accomplishments. I will talk about that in just a while. And then we have with us today Dr. Shiv Kumar Kalyanaraman from IBM Research, Bangalore. Shiv Kumar actually in the world of networking and communications need no introduction. He was a professor in RPI in New York, and he was he's very, very accomplished in networking. He moved back to India a few years ago, where he's now heading a major division in IBM Research in Bangalore. Very, very active researcher in networking and communication and related areas of app services and applications. So again, a very warm welcome to Shiv Kumar Kalyanaraman, who's very kindly agreed to come over here. And then as the second year BTech would have heard, Dr. Saurabh Bansal is here from IIT Delhi. One of the youngest faculties, I think, in the computer science department from IIT Delhi. Was really happy he agreed to come here and address the second year BTechs and teach them something on operating systems. So I will make sure he comes once in a while whenever he has time. So once again, a very warm welcome to all three of you for visiting NIT University and for having kindly agreed to spare time. I know many of you are flying back tonight. Sajal is leaving back to the US. Shiv Kumar will flight 8 o'clock, so I was rushed back to Delhi, but I'm very delighted that they could make it. I will now introduce the first speaker of the day, and that is Professor Sajal Das from University of Texas Arlington, who has been very, very instrumental in championing several programs, again in the space of pervasive wireless networking communications. Currently he is serving as a program director in the National Science Foundation, Washington DC. Many of you may not know, our students may not know, that in US if you want funding, every faculty has to get a funding, it's mandatory, and the funding, one of the sources are the National Science Foundation. And there, everyone has to write proposals, they have to be approved by NSF. Professor Das has a very accomplished career, and that the fact that he is a program director in NSF just speaks volumes of for his contribution in the area. He is the editor of several journals. In fact, the list is so large I don't want to name the journals here. He started various programs. He's an adjunct visiting faculty at IIT Kanpur, IIT Guwahati. Several students in India have gone to US thanks to Sajal Das. He's very friendly in nature. He's great. He's very close to the students. He's a great advisor. I would say he's an advisor to most of the students in India at the BTech and MTech level. So again, a very warm welcome to Professor Sajal Das, and he will share with us today his thoughts on the areas that he's been working on the last thing. Thanks.
So thanks very much, Rajiv, for the invitation. So this is my first time over here. So last year I was passing through this area from Delhi to Jaipur, but I did not realize the existence of this university. But when Rajiv was visiting me last year in October in my university, he was talking a lot of good things about the NIT University, and I made it a point that whenever I'm in India next time, I should come and visit. And when Mr. Kamal was showing me around, or showing us around the campus, so it reminded me, I studied in Ramakrishna Mission School, in a residential school full of just green areas and all, near Calcutta. So that reminded me that, okay, studying close to nature is so useful. And that's why I felt very attached to this place in that sense. So in the next, whatever time that I have, 30-40 minutes, I'll just try to give you a guided tour of some research areas that I've been working on for the last decade or more in this particular topic, wireless networking. Starting with that, then pervasive computing, sensor networks, smart computing, and so on and so forth. The number of slides that I have probably I can easily cover about 2 hours, so I'll try to skip through them as much as possible given the time frame that we have. But nevertheless, my email contact is there, so I welcome any of you who would be interested in knowing more about what we do, or for anything else that you think that I could be of any help for your understanding, research, interest, motivation, whatever. So, I started my career long ago as undergraduate computer science student. So I got my undergraduate degree from Calcutta University, first batch in computer science BTech. Then I was even the first batch of the GATE exam, and went to IISc Bangalore for my masters. That's where we had some overlap with Rajiv, long time. So I started, so the prelude that I'm giving, so you can see the landscape of the roadmap where I'm coming from, right? So at that time, of course, the wireless networking was not in the picture. So when I was an undergraduate student, cell phone was not a common thing at all. The whole concept of cellular came much later. Late 80s, early 90s, we have started seeing the full proliferation of that. Okay? So with that in mind, so let me just give you a little bit background of my research interests and directions, so that will lead in a very natural way. That's what I'll be talking. Okay, my own research interests and directions. Talk a little bit on the next generation of wireless and mobile networks, and what are the research challenges that we are facing in the community. Let's talk about the wireless sensor networks. So students who are BTech students, MTech students, or PhD students, we are looking for food for thought. I hope that you'll find some topics which will be of interest for exploration further in your thesis. And now I have 4 parts, as I said, maybe a couple of hours talk, but depending on how much time we will have, I'll just cover some of the exciting research projects that we have executed, what we call like smart environments, and specifically some good application on smart healthcare, security, starting from looking from a smart environment for basic security, and we have built some smart home supported by the NSF, the research project, and we have actually one dormitory in the university campus. We equip them with technology and all to realize some sort of a smart environment, smart home. And so if I can make it work, my quick template or something else for a demo, otherwise I'll just talk about it. So again, so let's just go back a little bit and see where we stand in terms of our computing arena. I hope that you probably have heard of Moore's law. So Moore's law basically talks about that how the technology evolves over time. So first observation from 60s onwards with the CPU speed doubling every 18 months. And we have seen that the same trend works for memory, for bandwidth as well. So it's basically doubles every certain number of years, whether there is 12 year, 15 year, 18 year, that depends on the technology and the scale which we took over. Only thing which has not scaled that much is the battery technology. The battery, and that's still a bottleneck, because for the handheld devices, you have battery operations and all. So I don't know whether you can read everything or not. So what we have here, starting from, let's say, our engines, task force engine, analytical engine from 1900 to let's say 2000, that's an exponential trend that you see in the growth. So what we have on the y-axis is basically the computational speed that you can get, number of calculations that you can do per unit of time. So this particular slide basically says that if you had scaled, let's say, in year 2000 about $1,000, then the computational speed that you had, so you could do probably 10 to the power 9, 10 to the power 10 calculations per second. So you know the units, the meets, fifths, and all the million instructions per second. So of the order of 100,000 or even 10,000 million orders instructions that you can execute. Okay. Now, if you have read this book, otherwise I would recommend you to read this book. So Ray Kurzweil is a freelance writer. So he writes lots of things about science and extrapolates imagination. Sometimes very provocative as well. So in the community there is a lot of controversy. But the title of the book itself is very provocative. The art of spiritual machines and computers will exceed human intelligence. So he was basically taking, so his starting point was that, okay, what happens if the technology evolves the way Moore's law is satisfied? Right? Now, of course, there's a miniaturization of the devices that you can do. There are physical limitations of the laws, quantum mechanical principles, special theory of relativity. So not that you can miniaturize the devices and get the speed up as much as you want, but nevertheless, that's trend stays. So he's plotting now the graph up to year 2100, which is the next century. Okay? Assuming the population growth will remain as it is. So for example, right now 6.2 billion people on Earth, and let's say all the projections that we have. So what is basically projecting over here, if that particular trend continues and Moore's law still holds, that in year 2016, the same $1,000 worth of a computing device or machine will have enough computing power, number crunching power, which will match the then computational power of all human beings are. Computational power, of course, creativity is a different phenomenon. How much number crunching that we can do? Think about $1,000 purchase. So that's the extrapolation of a very simplified model. Population growth remains as expected, Moore's law holds, all sorts of things. But nevertheless, what it basically tells you, we are only 50 years down the road from there. You have a small device in your hand. It is very, very powerful compared to the machines that I used when I was an undergraduate student, a mainframe computer. Right? Very powerful in terms of speed, in terms of storage. A small thumb drive, pen drive, could store all your life history. 80 years, 90 years of your life history. Think of a huge amount of information repository. So smartness is there embedded now, whether we accept it or not, right? In terms of your devices, in terms of your technology, in terms of computing power and everything. Question now is, we have smart devices, lots of different types of devices that collects information. You network the information to exchange and coordinate activities and tasks, right? Then you have lots of powerful computing paradigms, grid computing, peer-to-peer computing, embedded computing, real-time computing, just name it, UBP computing, to harness the power of all this information that you capture. Then of course you have lots of software services and applications to display that and take actions, make decisions on that, right? So all these things are there in bits and pieces. Technology is advancing in every domain. Computing domain, networking domain, device domain, software services domain. Right? Now can you have holistic design in an integrated manner so that you can create an environment where you can get things done in a very proactive manner based on user behavior, user preferences, user habits. So where actually the smart computing come in the picture. And we are taking care of many of the routine work of the individuals or the systems without asking, because I know how the system behaves. Okay, any smart environment should be able to do that. That's where the smartness and intelligence come from. So okay, given that, Mark Weiser passed away in 1999. He was a researcher in Xerox Center in Palo Alto. In 1991, he basically pioneered the whole field of ubiquitous computing, or what we call progressive computing now. Wrote a very seminal paper which appeared in Scientific American and also in the Communication of the ASEAN, which basically talks. So basically, his visionary paper is that our profound technologies are those which disappear. They work on our behalf all the time without our explicit knowledge. Okay? And they are weaved in our daily fabric of life. Think about how many devices we carry. I know that Professor Adishwari has 2 cell phones carrying all the time. Right? Even probably one for GSM, one CTM, maybe dual mode something else. You may have BlackBerry. Right? You may have other devices. Just think about it. We are all connected all the time. Now that becomes a moral fabric of our life, daily life. Weaved in our daily life, the technology. We get a lot of things done with it, even asking. Right? So that's the starting point, and I was very fortunate to jump into this area of wireless networking as early as 94, 95. And that's really the starting point of proliferation of cell phones and all the telecom companies was booming. It's the dot-com burst rate, dot-com area, not the burst rate. So coming back to my own background, I'm just giving that so that you can see how naturally things evolve. And I was very fortunate to follow that track as much as possible for my own interest. My undergraduate BTech project and master's thesis was in distributed systems, distributed analysis and modeling of distributed systems. When I went to US for my PhD, I worked in parallel computing, high performance computing, mostly parallel graph algorithm design, optimization and all. And I continued that for about 10 years or so, parallel distributed computing. I still do a little bit, but 94, 95 onwards, I had very strong collaboration with Nokia Research Model Networks, Ericsson, so that triggered me to jump into wireless mobile networking. Okay? And I'm just listing some of the topics that we have worked on in distributed computing over the years without going into the details of that. So in wireless mobile computing area, we talk about lots of different things. 3G, 4G, cellular network, wireless LAN, wireless mesh, ad hoc networks, mobile internet, wireless multimedia, mobility management, resource management. These are all topics by themselves, and we've done lots of different things in different contexts. So I'm not going to the details of any of them, but if there's interest, we can always share ideas. So 94, 95 onwards, I started that. I'm still continuing in that arena. Then Mark Weiser's vision in 1920 took only 7-8 years to realize and implement systems which could be truly pervasive as well as ubiquitous. Okay? In terms of information, because technology must evolve towards that goal, because we are ahead of its time. And the topics that we deal with in pervasive computing are listed over here, with different types of architectures, algorithms, protocols that we design, and they apply them for different contexts like healthcare, security, privacy, energy sustainability, and lately mobile and online social networking. Because we all are users of social networking now with the devices. Right? And then pervasive computing mostly I started around 99-2000 time frame. Then 2002-3 time frame onwards I started looking into smart computing. And now how do I integrate all these things to realize some system where I can build the intelligence, I can do context-aware computing. So I analyze the system behavior, user preferences and habits, would build that into the system and go from there. So I'll give you some project as an example to illustrate these things. Okay? And lately I have been working even with Professor Basu, that you mentioned. We have some students working on modeling biological networks. So the human body is a very complex, large-scale network. It has multi-scale phenomena, and we are working on that as well. Now, I thought I touched base on this only very briefly, but let's see. To lead to pervasive computing or smart computing environment, we need several enablers, enabling technology. Okay? So it's devices, because you have to collect information from the environment, from the system. And we have been observing very rapid growth of the device technology. Okay? Small devices, very powerful devices, they may have a resource constraint, less CPU power, less bandwidth, less memory, less battery, but still they're very useful, and that space is still growing, including like all this, you are probably familiar with all the iPhone applications now, the smartphone apps. Then network convergence, lots of challenges. That doesn't mean that we will solve all the problems, but a lot of things are happening. Either in broadband convergence or in wireless mobile space that includes wireless mesh, mobile internet, regular internet, wireless local area network, wide area network, different types of technology standards. Because again, like devices help us capture information from the environment, and in isolation the information has no meaning. So when I network them, distribute them, do lots of things together in a collaborative manner, integrated manner, I get the power of the whole system. And of course the data is so huge, we need very sophisticated computing paradigms. Think about a mobile service providers having 500 million or 100 million subscribers, how much information they generate every day. So all sorts of calls, you put them in database, this thing, that thing, and you have to mine those information, you have to process those information. So I cannot think about networking in isolation without the computing in mind, whether I develop devices or in the background. And then of course I need the systems and services to make sure that for a user, I can provide all the applications and services that we need. So lots of software development, middleware development, human computer interfaces and all, right? So this is the premise as an enabling technology. Now, in each direction, lots of things are happening. But still, the main challenge that we are facing is not engineering integration and exercise to put this together, but how to develop the right kind of architectures, algorithms, models, and protocols so that we can get what we want systems to do. That's a huge challenge. Lots of fundamental problems are there. I may not have time to go over the details of everything, but we'll just give a synopsis of that. So the first thing I'll just touch upon, since the title is from wireless networking to smart computing. So wireless network nowadays is a very heterogeneous network. It's conglomeration or coexistence of different types of network. And when I say wireless network, I'm not eliminating wireline network or internet because that is already there as a backbone. Okay? So you can see that, and then you may have, so these clouds of different types of networks you can just extend on. This is not exhaustive of everything. You may have community radios, you may have home enterprise network, sensor networks, or whatever, mesh network. Right? So spectrum is very limited, wireless spectrum, but you have to make use of it as much as possible in an opportunistic manner. Very heterogeneous. The device space is very heterogeneous. Networking technology standards, protocols are very heterogeneous. Then you have different types of computing. So mitigating the heterogeneity in a seamless manner is a very challenging problem if you just want to do it in the best possible way, not just in any way which gives a solution. Because in computer science and engineering or IT, we look for solutions which are the best possible solutions. In algorithms plus coordinates, you learn what is the best way to do it. Optimal usage of the resources, right, is not just one solution. So, next generation wireless network, of course, wireless convergence is on the horizon, or lots of activities being made by standards bodies, by research community, industry as well. And the goal is basically how do you provide ubiquitous network coverage and seamless connectivity. And I understand one of the key principles of this institute is seamlessness, that I was told, right? So seamless without being, so the seamless could come from any different thing, cultural boundary, crossing the cultural boundary, political boundary, social boundary, educational boundary. So you think about all of us in this room, so much heterogeneity is there in our personality, in our upbringing, everything, right? How do you mitigate this heterogeneity? That itself is a challenge. That's a social skill we try to develop. Now, this is not different in a technological arena as well. How do you really make these things work? Every company standards, they have a different way of doing things. There's no consensus how to do that way. Right? How do you seamlessly run and execute your station? Do user mobility across network? Interoperability? Convergence of different types of media, voice, video, data, services. Right? Now, the driving force, of course, is also different types of applications that let us think in this way. And so before that, let me just tell you my premise, my next generation wireless network, whether this is now at this time or 2 years or 5 years down the road, depending on how the technology is evolving, we can think. So the premise is that the future generation network will be large scale, which already is happening, very heterogeneous, coexistence of different types of networks, very complex system, and is dynamically evolving. It's not a static phenomenon at all, right? And of course, the different types of devices, they are already embedded in our daily fabric of life, in a system or otherwise. And we also assume that different types of sensors will be all pervasive, from clothing to coffee mug to refrigerator to building infrastructure to manage the energy and sustainability. To assume that in future, which already is happening, developing and developed countries and otherwise also, the wireless connectivity is granted, is given, right? So given that what we have, challenge is basically how to support content-rich applications where you have information deluge. Think about a small amount of, a pen drive has so huge information. Do you want to just, in a flashback, you want to see, what did I do in my 5th birthday, for example? You want to query that. See the amount of information that you have in small device. What will be the right kind of information processing and database querying mechanism? So full policy, the whole information management to be leading to different paradigm. The amount of information that we process. Of course, we are doing data mining, we are doing classification, this thing, that thing. But we need more and more. So think networking as inclusive with other areas like computing, information processing as well as other things. Right? Now, of course, the driving forces as services, ubiquitous services. Right? And here I have listed lots of applications. Some of them in policy right now, it is happening either in reality or as a prototype development. Some of them will come in the future. And actual reality and commercialization may take 2 to 5 to 10 years down the road. But still, we should be always extending our imagination to think about that and how to solve and tackle them, right? It could be advanced automotive. You know, the cars nowadays have 25 to 30 processors, and a huge number of sensors, and then a lot of things for us. Pick up our intelligent transportation systems, and different car companies, they have driverless cars. They can navigate through busy highway as a prototype, of course, but it's not a commercial product yet. But think about environmental monitoring control, energy, climate, critical infrastructure protection, and in the room we have researchers from IBM working on this smart planet, smarter grids kind of stuff. Think about disaster management, health monitoring, healthcare and wellness management. So point is that research is becoming more interdisciplinary, so is education. So in an isolated domain, let's say I may have medical doctors, I may have climate and civil engineering, environmental experts, computer science. Unless you put these resources together and take the totality of the problem, you may not be able to solve the grand challenges. So there's computer science and IT has a significant role to play in each of these areas. And some of the later things are having social networking for progressive adaptation because we all are connected now. And there have been lots of prototypes and studies that how social networking is changing the notion of our societal, the nature of the, let's say, current society as well as community building. So it's a different types of community that you are building through social networking, which is different in some sense as well as there's some similarity of the existing society that you live in right now. It's giving a new paradigm in some way. And of course leading to smart computing, and we'll talk about some of those. So, Rajiv asked me what are the research direction and trend. I'll keep very high level. Some of the cases I'll talk about some specific things. So what we need to do more fundamental theory and foundations. Of course, we need to develop all these application services. That's the end goal. But in the process, the design should not be ad hoc. Should not be just an engineering solution. What are the paradigms? What are the fundamental theory and foundation that we can develop to understand the next generation wireless network, let's say, to support this type of services. Right? Now, of course, that's very high level, and maybe everybody talks about that. So let me just pick at least one aspect of it. One aspect of it, of what I see is a grand challenge. Right? So what I'm planning now since the system is very large, very complex, dynamically evolving, there's a huge amount of uncertainty in the system. And this uncertainty is not just, if you talk about an information theorist, a wireless communication theory person, they'll say, of course we have dealt with it in the physical layer, in the communication layer, in the radio design and all. True. But what I'm claiming that the uncertainty is not just a characteristics of the physical layer, or the closest one is the MAC layer phenomena. Even for the higher layer, if you think of the protocol stack, session layer, network layer, application layer, everywhere huge amount of uncertainty is there. Physical layer uncertainty plays a significant role, but we do not have much understanding of this uncertainty happening at the higher layer. Okay? Now uncertainty means what? That means, think about, if I ask you the question, what is information? I'm asking the students, what is information? If you just give me one line description or definition, what is information? Anyone?
Raw data.
Raw data? Would you consider raw data as an information?
Meaningful data.
Knowledge about anything.
Because yes, raw data may not have much meaning, it may not be information at all, right? Process, yeah, you can process, get something out of it, you extract knowledge, right? But if you think about it, more precise definition is actually, what is that?
Meaningful data.
Meaningful data. So let me just rephrase that in a different word. So information is a measure of uncertainty. About a system I did not know anything, I have a lot of uncertainty. If information, which is meaningful data, process or whatever, reduces my uncertainty, that means I have a meaningful information. So information is a measure of uncertainty. If information does not reduce uncertainty of a system, then I will not call that as meaningful information or data. Right? So that's a precise definition in some sense. Now, with that, the whole information theory grew. You can actually quantify that in terms of entropy, mathematical models and theory. Information is a measure of uncertainty. And the uncertainty is captured in terms of entropy. Just like the way you have thermodynamics entropy and all that. Now, what I'm planning over here, again, like keeping at high level, at the physical layer of communication and the channels, we understand there's a lot of uncertainty over there. Because your wireless link is a time varying stochastic fluctuations, so the readings may vary because it's raining, it's foggy, going through mountains, trees, obstructions, propagation, fading. And that implies basically your bit rate noise is introduced, your bit rate is changing, your parameter data is changing, and lots of very nice mathematical tools are taken. Well understood. Does not mean it's dead, and lot of things are happening there. But what we do not understand how this uncertainty percolates in higher layers of communication when we talk about networking applications, systems. But if I know how to manage uncertainty, I should be able to adapt to the perturbation of the system. You perturb some part of the system with data or input or whatever, I should be able to predict exactly what is happening in the system. Right? So we have to understand very well. Examples at higher layer, for example, node mobility. Think about you are a mobile cell phone user and you are moving all the time. And your mobility is different from my mobility. So that itself is a very uncertain phenomenon. Right? So I do not even know how to manage that very well. I cannot simply go, users are moving following a Poisson distribution. Whether that has any meaning or not, questionable. Right? Well, everybody does not follow the same distribution either. Right? So if your node is moving with uncertainty, your link is fluctuating with uncertainty, you can see the topology is changing dynamically. There is a huge amount of uncertainty in the topology. If I do not know how your topology is changing and behaving, how do you do your very best routing? I'm not talking about just providing one solution for routing. I told you, your call gets delivered the best possible way, using the least amount of resources, using least amount of information exchange between the entities. That's the kind of things I'm looking for, right? So you can see that how that changes. Now, if I do not know how users are moving, how many users will come to this room, I don't even know what is the resource demand at any instance, and the resource availability as well. So there is resource management. So mobility management can be looked as an uncertain phenomenon as well as resource management. And then you can extrapolate traffic load, application, and then understanding. So if I just tell you from this perspective, let's say I have an application about video conferencing. You're taking a video conferencing class, right? Or attending a lecture. Let's say that particular delivery media must have certain amount of bandwidth, certain amount of reliability, certain delay requirements that you want to satisfy, right? That's your application requirement. Now if I ask you, okay, to satisfy that requirement, how do I need to plan my radio at the physical layer to deliver that quality of service? This is not well understood. I'm not talking about any solution again. The best possible solution. That means I do not know when I cross the layer boundary in the network protocol stack, how much information is being passed. In information theory, there are some results in what is called information processing bounds, but they are as good as anything that you can do. There is a lot of information loss. But this bound, that means you either over provision for the resources, you have underutilization of the resources. Okay? So you never utilize that. So if I summarize what I see is still a very challenging problem, you can all think about how to identify various uncertainties and their impact, not only on the physical layer, but all the layers above it. Okay? And if I know how to do that, I should be able to provide good fault tolerance and survivability. I should be able to handle disruptive situations, whether it's a natural or inflicted under uncertain conditions. Okay? So again, this is very high level, but I want you to think from that perspective, very fundamental. Right? So what is the goal? Can I design very robust or adaptive architectures, algorithms and protocols? What I call to tame uncertainty at various levels. By taming, I mean either you reduce the uncertainty that you have, or you cope with it. The coping is also part of adaptivity. Think about how human civilization progresses. We cope up with lots of different challenges in our lifestyle and goals, right? In certain cases, mathematically, you can show that you can reduce the uncertainty of the entropy. Some other cases, you may not be able to do that, but I take advantage of it, cope with it to the very best that I can do. Okay? And there's a huge amount of challenges. So just one example how uncertainty at different levels impact. We talk about this routing, we talk about shortest path routing, for example, using Bellman-Ford's, Dijkstra's algorithms that we have done in your classes, for example. Right? But think about I have a mobile network where nodes may move, or if I don't start a session, I don't exist in the network. Right? If the links fail, then topology is changing, and I want to still communicate from one node to another node. This topology is changing, users are moving at their own rate. So we have done some work. I'm not going to the details that how you can manage uncertainty even at the higher layers to make sure you do it in the very best possible way. Again, the question would be, what is the minimum number of information exchange or the bits of information exchange so that you have an optimal routing? You can track a user with as best as possible. Right? You predict the behavior of the system. And think about the premise is that a good learner is a good predictor. Right? How do you learn? You collect information, you process that information, then you apply your judgment. That judgment is a decision which gives you more intuition. If I do not know how safe this particular city is Ningama is, I'll dare to go anywhere I want. But if I knew certain part of the city is not safe to go, I'll avoid it. Right? So that's the same way. So can you build systems where I have better information content? That's why I ask the question, what is information? Which reduces uncertainty. I have better understanding, I have better knowledge, better learning. By virtue of that, I should be able to predict the behavior of the system. If I can predict, I'm basically reducing, adapting the system in the presence of perturbations. Okay? So that's about the wireless network. There's some challenges that I faced. Okay? So Rajiv, please tell me when I need to. Right? Wireless sensor networks. That area is also growing at a very rapid rate for the last, I would say, 10 years. In sensor network, we have many. So the goal of a sensor network is we are trying to understand the physical world as best as possible. Understand it, solve and control. So human body, of course, we are the best example of a sensor network. Our sensor organs, our neurons, nerve signals, they are all sensors. But now we can build wireless sensor networks, very tiny devices just like a coin that you can see. And an integral component of it is that control part is sensing and actuation. You sense the environment, whatever, temperature, pressure, image, sound, velocity, whatever. Then you do lots of computation in the sensor now. And you also communicate. And when you do wireless communication, all the facets of wireless communication and challenges that become prevalent. In addition, you have been sensing as well as actuation of decision making and control. Right? So that gives additional challenge. So a physical world that we need to understand, solve and control. That's the key, and sensor networks has enabled cyber physical systems. So physical systems I understand, let's say servo control, industrial processing, or my physical environment as a nature I want to monitor. Temperature, pressure, humidity, weather. And I sense the physical world, collect a lot of information, and that information is a digital information, which is the cyber world. So that's only one part of it. Now, the information that you get in the digital world, you crank this information, process the information, harness the power of it to make some decision and take an action, and the actuator basically feeds back from cyber world to the physical world. So cyber physical systems must have this control loop, feedback control loop. Sense the physical world, process information, make decision, take a control action or actuation, feedback, so that you can improve in a continuous cycle. And with that in mind, of course, lots of applications are going on. Some commercial, some prototypes and all, starting from your civilian application, military application. That could be environmental monitoring, traffic control, health monitoring, body sensor network, structural health of a building, process control, and then security, surveillance, target tracking, all these things. So there are lots of different prototypes are built, lots of applications. Some people are now question is whether that's a commercially still a viable thing in a large scale or not. Is the question, because commercial deployment does not happen overnight. One has to see a good business model, good application, how many customers, how can you keep the cost down. That's a different issue. But we should not restrict our thought process just because we don't see commercial usage right now. Because research always goes ahead of time. Thought process goes, and that leads to new technology which will be useful in future, right? So in terms of research direction, lots of things that one can do. I'm not talking about data broadcasting, dissemination, routing, we all need to do that. The more challenges that we see nowadays in sensor network, see sensor actually collects data, raw data, and that defines some context. I'm standing over here, the camera sensor might say, okay, you are in location XYZ, that gives me some information, context. Right? But sometimes the context may not have much meaning. I may not be able to conclude anything. I'll give you an example. I'm monitoring health of a patient, my body sensor network. Let's say the temperature sensor says, okay, temperature of the body is now what? 36 degrees. Celsius. What does it mean? Let's say your body's sensor gives a temperature of a patient, a person as 36 degrees Celsius. What would be your conclusion? Huh? Normal? What about if it is 42 degrees? Here's a fever. That's the first. Yes, that's the first conclusion, but is that the only conclusion? Let's say I'm hiking, jogging, running, doing exercise. I have a high heartbeat. Right? It could be 40 degrees, 39 degrees, whatever, right? So you can see that a single mode of information or context of information may not be enough to conclude anything. I need to know the state of that particular person. Is he sleeping, walking, or jogging, exercising? So I need multimodal sensing information. So that's actually what I mean by semantic interpretation. So I have context coming in bits and pieces from different devices and sensors. And these data help me to get some idea about the system. But unless I put an interpretation, in this case, what is the semantic interpretation? What was the state of that particular person? Sleeping, lying, sitting, or person walking, jogging, exercising, right? So that's exactly what I mean by that you need to aggregate information coming from different types of sensors, multimodal sensors. And then what is the semantic interpretation? Most often it is a very complex job. And the sequence of context with the semantic interpretation in between defines what we call situation. That's why it's a situation awareness, for example. Okay, how do I assess a situation and then go from there, right? So questions that we'll be asking, how to understand and analyze system behavior to capture context, and sometimes you may not get the right information. My sensor is very weak, the data that I get is very noisy and incomplete. Right? But you have to still make best out of it. For example, somebody has a heart attack, or whatever data that you generated from EKG signals, you have to just deal with that, but you still want to make the right decision so you can rescue the situation. And also, how do you make a system very much context and situation aware so that I can anticipate? See, this disruption is a very general term. Somebody said normal behavior versus abnormal, anomaly. Okay. Health risk could be a health anomaly in some sense. In security context, the anomaly could be a security threat. Right? So you can just think, so that is what is a normal behavior and context, what is not normal, by aggregating information from different contexts. That's a serious challenge. Think about it, for example, in California, forest fire is a very routine thing. California, right? And there has been sensors to detect forest fire, give alerts to the police and rangers and all, but just knowing that in that location XYZ the temperature is this much is not enough. You have to know how the blaze is moving so that the forest ranger does not take that back and get killed. Right? So that's the thing, how does it propagate? So there are lots of different things that one can talk about. Now, I'm just asking Rajiv just a minute, please don't feel embarrassed to interrupt me whenever you think, because I have a modular thing. Okay. Because I have a lot of different things I just want to talk about. So I talked about some research trends and challenges that you think in wireless network, something that you think. So semantic interpretation and context situation awareness, people are working on this, there's a lot of scope to work on. So let me just give you a couple of examples of a project and how you can then start the work for the time, right? So smart environment is a research that we have been doing starting 2002. And I have collaborated with my colleagues who are like Diane Cook, for example. She is in AI, machine learning, data mining. So we have to collaborate with different types of people to bring expertise together. So smart environment, that's the way we define is one which is able to autonomously acquire and apply knowledge about users and their surroundings, which is the environment. So you acquire information, then you extract knowledge out of it, and then you try to adapt to improve the life experience of the users without their explicit awareness. So many of the things might look very qualitative in this definition, yes, but then we try to quantify them as much as possible by designing mathematical models and techniques and algorithmic solution. Still, there's a lot of interesting. So now, At the beginning I talked about ubiquitous computing, pervasive computing, very loose sense. Now one can actually show that the smart computing concept is more general, and I can, as a corollary, because I'm talking about explicit unawareness in a context-aware manner, so that leads to pervasive computing paradigm. But you make intelligent decisions, right? So what? So context. So acquisition of information comes from devices and sensors. Then you try to process that information, assess a situation and context, and then see what it means, what is the risk of the situation, take decision, right? Now what we have found over the years, at the beginning we were very ambitious and we have achieved some goals, but there are lots of things that we did not really understand at the time, but now I'm throwing that. So there are different types of context that I can capture through device. For example, I'm standing in this location. I'm taking that back. I can track it users, either through cameras, vision, sensors, whatever, right? I switch off this device, switch on the device, that's an activity. I cook food, an activity. I can monitor all these things with devices. I can also probably get a good idea about your habits and preferences by observing what you do, right? But those are, we call it like tangible context that I can measure through devices. But our daily life is guided by lots of intangible context, which are often more significant than tangible context, and we do not have much idea how to capture those. For example, your activity, your mobility, all these things are guided by your behavior, your mood, your desire, and right? So question is how do because think about a terrorist does not attack in a spur of the moment. It's a long-term thinking and desire to do harm, right? How do you capture that information? Of course, in social network, they are smart. There is a lot of study of the terrorist network, but they do not do direct communication. There are lots of indirect way of communicating, right? So, finding patterns, hidden patterns among seemingly uncorrelated events is a significant challenge. And most of those things actually are guided by this intangible context. So, the question is that how do I translate these brainwave signals to electrical signals that I can capture through a device? That's not easy. Although there has been studies in neuroscience and physiology, psychology that is all these things have gender different signals, like somebody being angry, greedy versus committing suicide has a different type of signals. We have not been able to capture those and translate that in the device so you can take a preventive action. Right? So in terms of examples, you can think about any environment that you interact with could be a smart environment. This is just some examples. Not about you know. So I think in the interest of time, I'll just flash you some ideas, maybe show some animated pictures of what we mean by smart environment. So you can think about many things that you do in your daily life. How do you try to automate them and make users' life much better? Now, of course, this is just a smart home vision. You can have health type of application where elderly people, differently abled people, they are taken care of. You provide security, let's say at the airport or somewhere. And we have done also different types of work in that domain. So what I would do, I'll probably just go to the conclusion slide in the interest of time and then leave some time for question and answer, because we cannot actually, we have done a lot of different things like healthcare application, security application, but if you know what I meant by some of these technological challenges and issues, let me see what I have. So I think let me just so in terms of health application, I'll tell you exactly what we have done. We have developed prototypes where you collect wellness management and health conditions of patients and make decisions, generate prompts. For example, let's say you have a person who has a memory loss. right? Has to take medicine every 6 hours. But there is nobody at home to take care of them unless there is a 24-hour nurse, right? So how can you have an automatic reminder system so that the patient takes medicine at the right time, right? So you have developed small robots who come with a medicine every 6-hour interval. A patient, by looking at that, knows that he has to take medicine, right? You can listen to them. We have developed systems which are more like logging information, and some companies are also doing that. Let's say, again, like a forgetful person goes out of the door, walks into the street and comes back. You come back home from work and you ask, did you do anything? No, I stayed at home. Because he does not know what he did, right? He or she. But first day may be harmless, second day could be a fatal accident on the street, right? So how can you monitor activities of the users and then review the log information and take the preventive measure, for example? You can do the same stuff, right? So then other challenges that we face that some environment is very homogeneous in this, like this lecture room. Everybody is here with a common goal to listen to something, right? But your home and your office, you behave differently in different environments, the same person. At home I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a son of somebody, right? My parents. My behavior is different from what I do in my university as a professor, as a colleague. Same person, just think about how they behave differently. Think about seamless tracking of the behavior of the user. I'll give you a more concrete example. Think about everything in the world is smart. In the morning I get up from my smart home, smart bedroom. Then whatever I do, then I drive a smart car on a smart highway, come to a smart office, smart classroom. Then after that, at the end of the day, I go back to my smart home or go to a smart shopping complex and get back or fly out to a smart airport. Think of the same user behaves differently in different environments. So my profiles are different, my habits are different. So how do you really track activities of the user, still expect the system to provide the services that you want? So these are very fundamental challenges that we are facing in the area. So with that, so let me just use this particular, so I usually use two things, maybe at the beginning it was not there. I put a sentence by Swami Vivekananda, who had a very profound definition of education. And I'll tell that for the students if you are not aware of. So his definition of education was a single sentence. Education is the manifestation of the perfection already in man. Education is the manifestation of the perfection already in man. So everybody is a huge potential, and manifestation of the potential is the definition of education. Same way, information is a measure of uncertainty. This potential is very uncertain because I do not know who has what potential, right? Which is latent. And manifestation of that latent potential is the education. So we should keep that in mind. And this particular, of course, is by Rabindranath Tagore. It's a very profound definition of a teacher. And many times as a teacher, I think, knowingly or unknowingly, we do not fulfill this requirement, then we blame that the students are not interested in learning, or somebody else is responsible. So we, as a teacher, teachers, the definition of a teacher, in my opinion, who is a lifelong learner. And the learning must be bidirectional. So we talk about in communication networking bidirectional channel communication, but most of it we forget that the teacher is also learning himself all the time, mostly from the students. The fact that I am senior to you, I graduated earlier, I am standing up this podium. A few years down the road, you'll be coming here, somebody else will be sitting there. So this parampara goes on and on, right? So if we just read this very carefully, so he's basically talking about if a teacher cannot inspire and motivate the students, he can only load their minds with information, which has less value than inspiring them to succeed and explore their full potential. Right? So I think we should all keep that in mind, and education institutes are there for that. And with that, let me just stop and entertain your questions. And the other thing is, we talked about, Rajiv, if you recall, that there is no shortcut to learning. There is no shortcut. When I was a student, I did not realize that. Like you probably thought that less work and high gain, right? Was the key, and we all probably have gone through the same process. So take that with that spirit, that the investment of your time that you do for the students I'm talking about. You have 30, 40 years of your career left in front of you. We are talking about 10% investment of that time, which is very prime at this time. 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, you're undergraduate and you study. The investment of time that you make, your return of investment is huge. You don't look back. If you don't do that, then in future we look back and we regret. that yeah, we should have done that. We should. Don't fall into that trap. We all have gone through those things once or other, right? But we try to at least convey that message that this time of your career is extremely important. Make use of it. And learn together. Disseminate extremely, I guess. Okay? And with that, let me stop. I'm sorry, Raji, I took longer time than I expected. Questions, comments, anything that you know? How many of you? David, raise your hand. Good, at least few of you will wait there. That's good. I'll give that home for you. Yes, please.
So, what is uncertainty according to you?
Not only just me, but the scientific community also thinks, right? So, Claude Shannon defined this for the first time back in the 1950s, early part of 1950s. So he defined uncertainty, so entropy, and the way it is defined like this. So if a system is uncertain, that means we do not know the exact nature of the system. So it's a more probabilistic phenomenon. So let's say I have an event, and that event can be described as a stochastic process. If it is a stochastic process, that means it happens with probability. If it happens with 100% probability, that becomes a deterministic system. So if it happens with, let's say I have an event X, or process X, that comes with a probability P of X, right? So if I have P of X as the probability, then since we have, and that's, so basically he was instrumental in defining the whole area of digital communication. Before that it was one analog, right? Because we quantified. Now if Px is the probability, think about anything that you know. You ask the question, how many bits does it require to represent that information? If I give you n as an integer, how many bits do you need? Log of n? Log, because that's the bit, whether it's base 2 binary, base 10 digital. So he basically came from the same angle. I have this probability of occurrence of this event or process X, Px. Take log of that so that I can describe that process in so many bits, log of Px. So Px multiplied by log of Px, that defines the entropy for that instance. Now Px is the probability, which is a fraction. So log Px is a negative number. So he put another negative number in front of it to make it positive. Now that's one instance of it. Now I observe the system for different instances over a period of time, and you basically get a summation of Px log Px, where X is an instance of a process which describes the stochastic nature. Okay, so that's the definition. So it is represented in terms of bits, because log Px is the bits, right? The bits is the entropy number. Okay, so if you open Google search, entropy in information theory context, open any book. It's a very beautiful subject, just like any other thing. But the main thing is basically how do you characterize uncertainty. Right? But when he was ahead of his time when he proposed these things. Analog field was dominating, nobody believed. When he wrote the paper was not accepted for publication because sometimes we do not think out of the box. We think it's because he is talking about something. What do you talk about? Bits of representation of a communication systems, right? Entropy was well understood in physics and in thermodynamics, which is different. Now we are talking about communication systems, Sherman or digital communication. But you see how the field grew, that digital communication dominates. So that's the story of it, that sometimes researchers think much ahead of their time because technology is not there. Because at that time we did not have the digital radio and other communication device to support his claim. It was a more mathematical domain and then later. Okay, somebody else have another question? Did I hear? There is some.